We're excited to welcome to the show Olympian, national champion, and the assistant coach at the University of Texas, Erik Sullivan. Thanks for joining us, Erik.
Thanks for having me.
So we want to get into a bigger topic, but before we get into that, I was curious about your experience coaching on the beach. I think a lot of people heard, but if people aren't aware, Texas added beach volleyball, which was a huge deal for our sport. I think a big step forward for college beach. But yeah, you were the head coach for the inaugural season, and I'm curious how it was diving into being a beach coach.
Yeah, it was super interesting. You know, we talked to our kids about being uncomfortable all the time. It definitely was uncomfortable for me. I grew up playing in the sand, and I still play in the sand, so I'm familiar with it, but definitely have never coached it. So huge learning experience for me. And using just our indoor players and staff for it, so we didn't really have a lot of people with a lot of experience across the board. But it was, I thought, in hindsight, I thought we got out of it what we thought we would get out of it. We talked to our girls about just being inquisitive and curious and having fun playing it, not too worried about the results. I was trying to tamper down their expectations. Obviously, we can do some stuff on the hard court that's pretty special, and I knew it would be a different challenge for us in the sand. But yeah, I think the majority of our girls really enjoyed it. I think we set it up in a way that it was going to be, we went to Hawaii and played in our first tournament on Kings Beach, which was a killer experience, and went to Long Beach right after that, and then finished up at TCU. So I think they enjoyed the experience of it. It was kind of in a cool setting, and we got to go do some fun things around it. But they didn't enjoy the losing part of it. And we definitely got better as we played. Both myself and the players. I think I was starting to figure some stuff out. But I think in total, maybe we had 22 days with practice and competing. So it was a pretty quick little deal for us.
So you said you knew that you had to tamper expectations. Did they know that? I mean, I can imagine if you're playing at the level that your team is from the indoor side, and then maybe watching, I don't know, maybe they catch some of the Gulf Shores and oh, we could crush those. We could do that. Did they have a sense of how difficult it would be?
I think they learned real fast.
Yeah.
I tried to tell them, look, you're gonna be warming up with a team on the court with you, and you're going to be sizing up your opponent, and it's going to be some little 5'10", young woman that can play the game at a real high level, but she's not doing anything that really catches your eye.
Yeah.
And it's going to be trouble for you. I don't think they really understood it. I mean, we got out in practice, and we got in some of the elements. When it got windy, you could tell they were starting to realize, wow, this is pretty challenging to try to control this thing when there's some stuff kind of working against you. Like I said, for the most part, we had a couple kids that had played some. We had some kids that had played here or there, and then we had some kids that hadn't played at all. And I mean, you could definitely see that kind of across our group. Like I said, talking to them, the majority of them really enjoyed the experience, and I think a few of them would probably stick around in it if their indoor careers don't go the way they want. So
yeah. I think we've all had that experience. I can remember my first California CBVA. This was back when it was the big court, right? And in warm-ups, you're just bouncing balls, and it's this old 50-year-old who can't move.
Yeah.
And then you go out and play and just get absolutely slaughtered, and it's just the worst feeling. Yeah.
I grew up in that as well.
Yeah.
Humbling.
Very humbling. Yeah.
And then Erik, it seems like there's a big push to specialize early, whether it's beach or indoor. I guess, did you find any benefits for your athletes playing beach?
For sure. Obviously, the NCAA put some time constraints on us. And when you are using the same athletes for both sports, it gives you some flexibility for some more time. So I think anytime you're just touching the ball more, I mean, at the end of the day, it's volleyball. So getting those extra contacts, having those extra reps, whether it was in the sand or indoor, I think was beneficial for us. And then I think you're spot on. In indoor volleyball, you have the ability to kind of hide some weaknesses, right? Your middles typically don't handle a lot of balls. They're not ball control players for you, and that doesn't happen all that often. We'll still train it with those guys because it does happen occasionally and it's important. But you could see those guys making pretty rapid progress just because there's nowhere to hide out there. You know, if you can't set a ball and all of a sudden they're serving your partner every single ball, you got to figure it out pretty quick. So I thought that paid off. You could see that in a few weeks of just training the beach, just the contacts and touches. I think we're getting a little cleaner for us, for sure, a lot quicker than they would just being in your 4-hour weeks.
And what about the negative side? Were there any bad habits learned in beach or anything like that?
No, again, you know, it was interesting for us because we were trying to figure out how to structure it because we didn't want to lose the indoor piece of what we were doing. And so, you know, we got into our individual, or what used to be called individual, the short hour weeks for indoor, and then slowly progressed into sand. We never totally got into just sand practice. We always had a day of indoor stuffed in there somewhere, but we had about, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 beach practices, but we always had indoor around it. So we were kind of bouncing back and forth. I'd reached out to some coaches that were still doing that, using that model for their programs, and they didn't think that there was any really ramifications or problems doing that. So we were bouncing back and forth. So I don't think we did it long enough to really get into anything quirky with the two. You know, the timing of it, obviously, when you're approaching in the sand's a little different than indoor, and kind of the speed that you can be going at. But, you know, we actually, our last weekend, we trained all indoor, went up and competed Friday and Saturday in the sand at TCU, and then played an indoor match on Sunday afternoon without touching an indoor ball for 2 days. And that's, you know, for the first 10 points, maybe it was a little bit sloppy. It wasn't all that clean. And then it cleaned right up. And I don't think you could really tell the difference.
Yeah, I wonder, you know, and I don't know, we had Karch on recently, and that, I mean, that's the way he grew up, right? And a lot of players grew up that way, whereas you bounce back and forth. But the model now for, especially for juniors and club, and I think it's, you know, the business model of, we're going to get you for this amount of time, you've got to commit to this sport. Obviously there's been some benefits, but the downsides too of maybe injuries and burnout and things like that. Do you think there's a way to integrate it with the junior level? And I guess how would you go about it? Or how, like, as you're talking to recruits, would you be pushing for more back and forth?
Yeah. I'm not quite as old as Karch, but I'm pretty close. And I think the model has just shifted so much. I don't feel, at least with the indoor girls, we really don't have like a periodization of the year. I just think they're going 12 months out of the year.
Right.
And I don't know, again, how the beach season's set up, if they're doing that as well, which I would imagine they are, because it seems like all junior club sports have kind of moved into that model of more is better. But when I was growing up, we had pretty distinct seasons, right? Like you'd play high school and then club wasn't as defined, but you weren't doing anything in the summer. Like you were playing beach, and it was awesome to bounce back and forth. You know, it'd give you a great break. And fortunately for me, I my first couple of years out of college, I went and played overseas, and then played in the Bud Light Four-Man Tour when I came back. And it was, you know, by the time you were done with indoor, you know, you'd roll back and it'd be like, oh, great, I get to go hang out on the beach for 4 or 5 months and compete out there. It was perfect. And then same thing, you kind of start to get burned on that a little bit, and you'd bounce back indoor. I feel like now gosh, I would hesitate at all to, I mean, I would love for our indoor players, the kids that are coming to us, to go play beach, because I think it's great for your game, but man, they're just getting worked at all different angles.
Mm-hmm.
You know, especially if they're at all involved with the high performance stuff with USA and all these camps going on. They're going 24/7, 365 days a year.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a lot. Yeah, it'd be nice to find some balance some way if they could slow down on one. And I guess it'd obviously be driven by what they're interested in, but it feels like you have to sometimes just be, yeah, like you said, 12 months a year in one. And I don't know if that's a great sustainable long-term model.
No. Yeah. And I don't
okay.
know, everyone I talk to as well, like we really haven't talked too much about having indoor players play in the sand and vice versa. But everyone I talked to said that eventually those players, like, it's just hard. It's hard for them. I think they burn out. They're going from one season to the next, and they tend not to get great at either sport. They're kind of somewhere in the middle with both. Do you guys use any of your indoor players?
we used to, and now we had one starter, so it's less and less. Yeah, it's been a couple each year. I think it takes a special person, and especially like from the academic side, and someone who's just, yeah, maybe
Plumber.
yeah, there you go. And
Yeah.
even she didn't make it. But yeah, I think it's doable with the right person, but it's hard for sure. But I think the three of us would have been all over it. But we're rare, you know. I think I probably know the answer to this one, but what about like psychological effects? I feel I hear people talk about it, the idea of confidence and not, messing with the player's confidence. And it just made me think when I thought of, you're taking this probably very confident group who won a national championship and then putting them and turning them into beginners. Was there any concern about how it was going to affect something like that?
For us, there was a little concern. I mean, we definitely talked about it, and like I said, I tried to tamper those expectations and tried to make it more about the experience and about just trying to have fun with it. We expected them to show up and compete to the best of their ability, both in practice and in competitions. But we weren't doing it long enough. Like, I don't felt like we did it long enough for it to really be this, I don't know, this way to identify with themselves of like, hey, I'm this beach volleyball player now. I play indoor, but I'm also a beach player. And gosh, I'm pretty good here, but I suck over here. I don't think we ever really got to that. It was all still, I think, very nuancical, or just kind of like, it was just something fun we were doing for a month. It wasn't this, there were no consequences behind it.
Right.
And I don't know, for good or bad, that's kind of how we approached it, of like, hey, winning and losing will take care of itself. I definitely didn't do a very good job. Well, I did a great job of scheduling of what we were trying to accomplish on the front end. But when we got kind of the final schedule of who we were playing, I looked at it based on the rankings and was like, oh, oops. I think probably 2/3 of the teams we played were ranked in the top 20.
Yeah.
And I don't know, we probably could have done a better job of trying to find some matches that we would have been a little more competitive in. But we had a good time with it.
That's actually one of the challenges of beach scheduling, is because you schedule where you're going to go and you don't necessarily know who's going to be there.
Yeah.
Where indoor, it's so much more regimented, but
yeah, for sure. But I don't know, in my ignorance too, like, I didn't really, I mean, obviously I knew some of the teams that were good, but didn't really know all the teams that were up and coming and building their programs and stuff. And so teams, when I was initially told like, hey, these 3 or 4 teams are going to be there, I'd be like, oh great, I know Hawaii's historically been pretty good, and I don't know about these other teams. All of a sudden I looked and they were all top 15 teams as well. So
yeah. The last 2-3 years, the landscape's changed a lot, and obviously now Texas going all in, that's going to change things too. And it's going to be interesting to see the dominoes, like who it's going to affect, who's going to add, and where the sport goes.
yeah.
Well, the main top. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Anytime you get big athletic programs getting into it, I think it'll be good.
Yeah. No, it's exciting for sure. So the main topic we had for today was, and it's a series of shows where we're going to talk to all the NCAA championship coaches and talk about their teams and kind of what some of the qualities were, and maybe the behaviors, the standards the teams had. So just kind of more broadly, what would you say are some of the big things as we go back to the indoor season, not the beach team, but the indoor team? What would you say were some of the things that made the Texas team a championship team?
Yeah, it was a really interesting year for us. We had quite a bit of turnover with the portal. And so we had, I think 11 new players in the gym. But a bunch of those players were transfers. So they weren't, necessarily freshmen. So they weren't young, having a new experience. They were older players that had been through it in another program. So I think that gave us a very interesting makeup. One of the things that we knew going in is that we were going to be really deep, and we obviously have some nice players in some positions, but we were really good in a bunch of positions. Maybe not the best in the country, but we were 3 or 4 deep in every position. And so one of the things that I think was spot on for us, as we identified earlier, is how do we get everybody on board with competing in that environment? And we came up with a theme. I don't know if you've ever heard the term Ubuntu,
Yeah.
which is I am because we are, is
Mhm.
basically how it's translated. It's an African term that a bunch of tribes use. That's about, community. The importance of your community is much bigger than the individual. And there's some really cool sayings that come out of it of, my happiness and my success and the things that are going to motivate me are going to be driven by seeing those same things with the people around me. So kind of, if it can't be me, then I want it to be you kind of mentality. And so we really kind of pushed that narrative early on, and I think the girls really embraced it. And again, most of them knew coming, I think the majority of kids that come to us know that it's not just going to be hey, I'm going to show up and I'm going to, have my place on the court, and it's not going to be in a competitive environment. I think our gym is typically we have, a lot of kids that can play, and you got to go compete for spots. And that's just part of coming to our program. So, but I think this group really embraced it. It was cool to see. And again, it wasn't without hiccups. There were obviously times where, there was actually, I don't know, this kind of goes to the DNA or the culture of our team. Logan was playing 6 rotations for the majority of the season for us, Logan Eggleston.
Uh-huh.
And there was a point where she just wasn't really performing at the level that we needed her to perform at. And Madison Skinner was kind of on the up, and she was doing great things. And we brought Logan in and just said, hey, look, you're going to be a 3 rotation outside right now for us. And Maddie's going to play 6 rows. So a little bit of a demotion. I think most people would say you're diminishing my role a little bit. And Logan, to her credit, there was no emotions. There was like, you know what, you're spot on. I would do exactly what you guys are doing as well. I think you're right to do that. It's fair, not only for you to take that away from me, but also really fair that Madison gets a chance at that because she's deserved that. And then in the next breath, she said, I'm going to earn that back. And we went out to practice. And that actually occurred about 2 or 3 weeks later. We ended up shifting back as Logan started performing a little better. And we felt we were a little better in that model going down the stretch. But that was kind of that was our team's DNA. It was just kind of this, I get it. And all right, I'm going to go compete for this. And that's awesome for Maddie. Let's go.
Yeah, that's great. And I could see how important it was with the depth you guys have, the Ubuntu, the I am because we are. I'd imagine even still there was, you have top players in the country. They're the best players in their state and, who then are on the bench. I imagine there's still conversations and people coming in like, yeah, I get this idea, but I want to be on the court. Like, what do I have to do? Like, what does it take? I love seeing her get better, but I want to beat her out. So I guess how would you handle those? Like, how would you give, I don't know, is it giving people like, here's the steps you need to do to beat them out, or you just need to accept your role and play to it?
Yeah, the role thing is really interesting, and we debate about this all the time. And I know a lot of coaches want to get in the room at the beginning of the year and lay everybody's roles out. But I don't know. I always felt as a player, like my role, I was always trying to improve my role. My role should be a constantly changing thing. And I don't, just to be like, hey, you're our third outside. I don't know. I'd be walking out of that meeting going, F you, I'm going to go earn my spot into the top 2 outsides.
Yeah.
I had plenty of those meetings as a player, and I never just felt like, oh, here's my role for the year. I think for us, a huge thing and what we try to do is just transparency. So a ton of communication. We try to teach the girls and help them communicate with each other. When there's difficult conversations to have, we're not shying away from those at all. We're embracing that. And, I don't think people realize that as a coach, like those are hard for coaches too. I know plenty of coaches in the countries that don't like having those conversations with players.
I'm one of them.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to know that, hey, I got to meet with these 3 players and have these talks with them about like, hey, here's, it's a little disappointing for you to hear this, but here's what's going on. And I think it's one of the things that Jarrett's done a really good job in our program of developing that and nurturing that, and starting from the top down. I think he's really good with it. And then we try to have a little more of a horizontal structure build to our program. We want our kids we give them tons of input into what they want their program to look like, what they want the standards to look like. I think any leader would tell you, when you have buy-in from the people that are theoretically below you, that the group just moves in a much more efficient way. So, we do a ton of that stuff, and it's not super structured. We don't have, hey, here's the 5 lessons that we go over every semester or whatever. But a lot of conversations with, whoever we've deemed as the leaders, as well as with the group and the freshmen. This is something that we started doing in the last couple of years, is we bring our freshmen in and just kind of give them a real kind of take the warm and fuzzy out of things and just go, look, this is really hard. I don't think the PSAs, the prospective student athletes, these kids that are coming up through club, hear that enough of like, look, I get this is what you want, and it's really cool. It's a fun thing to be a part of, but it's really, really freaking hard.
Yeah.
And so we sit our freshmen down and go, look, this next 4 months, I don't care what you've done, what experiences you've had in the past, are going to be the hardest 4 months of your life, with academics, with the team, with travel, with the time management load, everything that you've done in your life. This is going to be the hardest 4 months. It's going to be really cool. It's going to be really rewarding. It's also going to be super challenging and emotionally distressful. And you're going to go through all these ups and downs. But I don't know. I just don't think they hear that enough of like, there just needs to be this is what it's like. It's not all warm and fuzzy, because they've been getting that all the way up, right? Hey, you're the best player on your team. Everybody's recruiting you. Everybody's putting on their best face. Come here. We love you. It's all great. And it's just not the way it is. And so I think a lot of kids get here, or at least to this level, they go to college and they're all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, this is what the coach was like when he recruited me. And this isn't what it's like when he told me, come here and we'll take care of everything for you. Like, this is hard.
Yeah. That's great. I can see how important that is. It must be a shock. And I mean, I think the first semester of college is, I think, always the hardest. And especially you guys are straight into season. I can imagine.
Yeah.
It's important to get that across. I'm wondering, as I hear you talk about what you guys have created at Texas, and I'm thinking back to, I mean, I don't know if everyone knows about the storied history of UCLA and where you played for Al Skates. And obviously there was a large amount of really good players. And, the legendary Blue Curtain, where you had to kind of work your way from one side to the next. And I know it's a different era, different time, but are there lessons you pulled from that to this, or is there anything to draw from that?
Yeah, 100%. It's so I was good. I wasn't the best coming out of high school. Like, I was, I don't know, top 15, 20 player. But there were for sure outsides better than me. I could name a handful of them that you would know really well. And I kind of knew, I don't know, all the information stuff that people have now is totally different. I knew kind of the 12 guys that were playing for UCLA the year or two before, and that was it. I walked in there were 30 guys that were 10 times better than me. And I didn't know half of them. I just walked in, I was like, oh my God, who are all these guys? And they can all play. And yeah, I mean, I had a miserable freshman year. I was too weak. I wasn't very good. I was good for a couple of days and my body was just smashed because I physically wasn't at the level that I needed to be at. So I spent a lot of time on the other side of the Blue Curtain with guys. I mean, this was our class. Swadek was the best player to come in with our class. He was the best, probably the top 3 player in that class. But it was me, Kevin Wong, Jeff Nygaard, John Speraw, and we spent a full year on the other side of the curtain.
Yeah.
And just grinding it out. And I don't know, that I think made all of those guys in that group kind of what they are today, what they were able to accomplish, which was super cool.
And was it something Al did, or is it just that environment where you just got to fight for everything you earn?
Yeah, I don't think it just happened by accident. So it was definitely something that Al did, but it was that environment. I mean, it was so the way practice was structured is we would warm up together we would have all 25, 30 guys in some kind of drill for a little while on one court. And then after about 45 minutes, they would send, the other half on the other side of the blue curtain, and the starting 12, 14, 16 guys or whatever would be competing on the top court. And I don't know, half or 2/3 of the guys would walk right out the door. So they would go over to the other side of the blue curtain and just keep walking, and they were done for the day. And, Al didn't probably know anything otherwise. So I don't know, at some point you had to decide whether you were going to swim or drown, I guess. And so, our group, I think, was pretty unusual in the fact that everyone in our group was determined to swim. And for sure it came easier for some than others, but Sparrow is a great example, right? Like, he obviously got into the starting 12 or was like at least traveling all the time, but he didn't really play until his senior year. And then, his senior year was phenomenal.
Would that still work in the transfer portal age? Like, do you think half that group would have been gone?
I don't think it will work. I think the mentality of younger generations and kind of what they grow up with is a little different. So I think it'd be a hard way to manage a group like that.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that the beach part of that was interesting, right? Like, for us, we only had 14 players, and there was no real, obviously we had our better players in the higher groupings or whatever, but I wasn't managing 20 or 25 of them. Look at the size of some of these rosters. It's like, gosh, what are you doing with 15 through 22? And how are you managing those guys? Usually those are the harder kids to manage, right? 1 through 8 or 9 are probably pretty happy. 9 through 12 are come and go depending on the day. And then the rest of the kids that aren't really playing all that much, what are they thinking every day? Are they helping your group out? Are they disgruntled employees coming in every day? Like that part of it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure that part out.
How many beach players do you guys carry?
We've tried to keep it smaller. And we're an expensive private school, which I think leads to some of that too. Maybe more like Marv did at Pepperdine. But we had 17 this year. And I think that's about the number we'd like to be. You got 4 courts of 4 people. But there's the benefit of the other side of it where you're, I think kind of like Al did, and this year I think TCU, UCLA, Florida State on the beach, they all had huge rosters, and obviously have more people to select from, and competitive side of it, I think there's benefits to both ways. But I like the idea of more like going all in on a smaller group of the right people.
Yeah.
But I could see either way.
Yeah, it's nice if some of those kids, you get a kid that's maybe a marginal kid, you don't know if she's going to be great or not, and she can come and develop for a couple of years and is willing to do that. That's the harder thing. I don't think a lot of kids are willing to.
Right.
Say, my timeline here is a couple of years, and we've been really fortunate to. I don't know. We've had this nice run of really nice physical middles, and it's given us the ability to redshirt some kids, which is super rare in Division I women's volleyball. And somehow they just feel like it's some knock on them.
Yeah.
And Asia O'Neill's a perfect example. She came and redshirted, and she was behind who was she behind? Morgan Johnson and Brione Butler. And then I don't know, she's got one more year with COVID, so she's got an extra year and she's coming back and playing for us, but she just made the VNL roster this weekend for the national team. So she's getting to do that stuff. So having that extra time with her and having her, especially with some of the physical stuff she had going on, has been phenomenal. And I imagine she would tell you the same thing now that she's been through it. Obviously, there were some emotions, and that first semester was a little tough for her. But
well, we've talked
on the guy side, like I've redshirted, and I my career, I would have drowned if I couldn't have redshirted.
It's the best thing I did too.
Yeah, no brainer. We tell them all the time too. We get all these kids that come through and they're first team All-Americans their senior year. And it's like, gosh, man, I would do anything to have one more year with you versus that your freshman year when you were tragic and played all of 20 minutes,
Right. It's hard to see the long game.
Yeah. Especially nowadays. I just don't think they have the ability to really see that far into the future. They want everything now.
Well, so we talked a lot about your guys' culture there. I guess to get into volleyball specifics, What made you guys tough to play against? And are those strengths kind of unique to you guys, or are they important for, I guess, all championship teams?
Yeah, I think probably each team's built a little differently. I think for us, we just had so much balance. We knew offensively that we were going to be able to attack teams in a whole bunch of different ways. We didn't need to do it in some unique fashion. We didn't need to create some offensive system that was built around smoke and mirrors and trying to create distractions and, I don't know, dysfunction on the defensive side, as much as, look, we're going to have 3 or 4 hitters coming at you all the time. And really, we didn't have any holes anywhere. I think most people would tell you Molly Phillips was maybe our weakest attacker, just because she wasn't as dynamic as everybody. But I think she hit 370 on the year with almost 2 kills a game, right? Which any team in the program or in the country would take with their right side. So our balance, I think, was a strength for us. Our balance and our depth, as unexciting as that may sound, we knew for us, defensively and ball control was kind of going to be the big part for us. And we were very okay at it. About halfway through the season, we kind of challenged our team, and our 6 NCAA matches, we were top 3 in all categories defensively. So they kind of embraced that piece, and we started to kind of just smother teams. I just think, and we always felt, I think the best way of looking at it as a coach is if you can force the other team to just be great for a really long period of time, it becomes overwhelming. Most teams will crack or just can't do it. And so for us, most teams, even teams that maybe aren't highly ranked, will play out of their minds for 15 or 20 minutes. And then it's just, can we enforce our will over a long period of time? And I just think we did that. We didn't have any gaps. We were well balanced, and we could play the game for a long period of time.
Can you train that consistency, or that, like, do you work that into practice somehow, or does it just come with having that depth?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's about a little bit how you teach the game. I don't know. We're very into how we manage errors. I don't know how to say this in the best way. We don't go out playing to not make errors, but we want them to think their way through the process. And I'm a very risk versus reward thought process coach, I guess, meaning that, hey, I'm in some kind of bad situation as an attacker, whether the set's not great, whether I just don't have a great approach, or that everything's off, not to close my eyes and just blast at the ball. We'll be consistent there. And again, we're going to make errors. We're okay with making errors, but it's how we go about making those errors, I think, which is important. So we talk a lot about that, about managing the game. I think there's a lot of coaches out there that just think, for whatever reason, like, you just need to be aggressive all the time. And, if you get some crap set and just whack it out of bounds, like, at least you're going for it. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think the more I played at a high level, especially internationally, like, you start looking at the best players in the world, there were obviously guys that can get up and do some things physically, but they would just never give you anything. You would start looking at stats at the end of the game, and it's like, Jesus, they didn't, they made 10 errors in a match, and they forced you to compete for everything. Those are the great teams. The Serbian team that won it in 2000 in Sydney was a perfect example of that. You would watch them warm up, and they had a couple guys, but overall they were pretty medium. And then 45 minutes into the match, you're like, Jesus, they just gave you nothing. So I don't know. We try to structure around that. And again, it's a lot of talk and conversation and teaching, not so much just like, hey, we're going to go drill the heck out of this thing. I mean, one of the other things too about this group that made it really special is our depth provided us the ability to get in and compete every day in practice. And that can be pretty unique at our level. A lot of times you have 6, 7, 8 great players, and then you drop off pretty heavily. We were, I don't know, we were 16, 17 deep. There was nobody that we couldn't put in practice that would drop our level.
That's nice. Would you, I'm sure,
First world issues, right?
I'm sure it depends and it varies a lot, but could you maybe give us a peek behind a typical practice you guys would run, maybe the structure and some of the stuff you would do?
Yeah. Depending on the day, there's a few things that we're starting to use that really dictate how we train. A lot of it is, not a lot of it, but a big piece of it now is the load management piece. So we really have our sports science department involved in kind of how we're structuring practice and what that practice needs to look like. We use a load management or load monitoring system, Catapult, that's giving us real, I don't know, they're giving us indicators for each day of how we're working, basically. We also use athlete generated RPE, kind of what they're thinking and feeling as we're going through it. And we're using that to structure our practice. So we have some practices where sports science is saying, hey, it needs to be fast today, maybe 45 minutes to an hour of real fast, high intensity competition. So that day we'll, once we warm up, we're just going straight into 6-on-6 chaotic, high tempo drills. We'll have other days where our load will be, a medium to a large load, but not quite the high intensity. Those will be more structured, maybe a little more drilling. And we'll vary kind of the structure of practice around those load management pieces. It's super interesting stuff. And we've got staff here that helps us with all of it. But typically, we structure our practice, I would imagine, like most coaches. First 30 to 45 minutes is any kind of skill work that we need to do. We'll break up into smaller positional groups, setters, passers, middle blockers, work on whatever we feel like we need to work on within those groups, get into 6-on-6 and go. We're more of a play versus train model. So there's definitely more chaotic 6 versus 6 stuff going on than us standing on a box whacking balls at players. A pretty big proponent of, varying that. I think there's a time and place for it. At our level, if we weren't as skilled as we were, we'd probably do a little bit more drilling just to get the contacts. But we can definitely play and be pretty good.
If it's a day where, you're getting feedback from whatever the catapult or the different sports science stuff you have, where you're saying it's a day we're going to get after it, but maybe it's a day where the athletes are, I don't know, it's after a travel trip or it's just in the middle of the season and the effort intention's lower, maybe energy's lower in the gym. What do you guys do to help raise the level? Like, how do you bring the best out of them?
Yeah, I think the transparency piece, we're constantly asking them for feedback, and we're talking about input. They've got to flip this little thing into their sports bra every day. And it's, one of these things where you're just like, ugh, and we're constantly on them. And I think the biggest part is that we're real consistent with our messaging of like, look, this is helping us, first of all, help you be the best athlete you can be, but also getting us to a point where we compete at the highest level that we can compete at. So our sports science tests our athletes once a week. Every Monday they come in and force plate them. We had our third highest force plate output the Monday before the Final Four for the season. And then the interesting piece, and there's some things in here that are a little counterintuitive, that, will come from sports science. And just as a coach or growing up playing the sport, you're like, what are you talking about? We shouldn't be doing that. We should be doing this. And they're like, no. Here's how you're going to go. Our walkthrough the morning of the NCAA finals, our sports science came in and said, you need 45 minutes of high intensity, not a serve and pass. Don't go in there and serve and pass. You need 45 minutes. Get in, chaotic 6-on-6, get out. And they'll put them in the best position for them to compete tonight. And that just goes against everything you think of as a coach, right? Like you think like, oh, we're going to go in and
It'll be fresh
on a little bit and stretch and roll and just touch the ball and break a sweat and get out of there. And again, we'll circle up before practice and go, hey, this is what we're hearing. Here's what practice is going to be. And this is going to put us in a great spot for tonight. Let's go.
Did they say why that was?
Yeah, there's some neuromuscular, like kind of priming your body. a little over my head in some of the stuff, so we don't get too into the weeds of that. But yeah, just kind of that, like the low intensity, most of the time he wants us to be high intensity. So shorter duration, higher intensity typically is best. But all of it's super interesting. The way that you modulate your load through the week, how you're modulating through the month or the year. And all of it kind of stemmed from us coming back from COVID. We really started getting deep into it. You know, for us, I don't know, we stopped in March. We got our kids back in August, and for what we knew, we were going to have 2.5 weeks to get ready to play a match. Obviously that wasn't necessarily the case because of all the stuff that was going on, but that's what we thought going into that. So here we had the situation where our girls really hadn't been doing much for 4 months, and we're coming back. Some of them had been doing more than others. But how do we get them in a position to where we're going to go compete in this match? We know the acute load for that match was going to be some number that we couldn't control. How do we get them safely to that position to compete in that match? And so we really got into the kind of the inquisitive part of like, how do we do this from a science standpoint so that we're not endangering our athletes? You know, because the matches are all, I don't know, whatever, they're all 30 or 40% higher than you basically can replicate in practice without just smashing them from the emotional and mental load of it. So that was actually the genesis of all this. And it kind of took us 2 or 3 years to get comfortable with where we were at with whatever we were using to track, as well as what those numbers actually meant. You know, if we did get a number from our sports science of like, hey, this is how hard you guys should be working today, what that meant in real translation of like, okay, we know this is kind of a medium to heavy day. We're going to go for about 2 hours today. What does that practice structure look like? And so that's kind of, you know, we sit down to structure practice every day. That's the first question is, hey, what's our load supposed to be today? And then we'll start going from there.
And you gave us kind of a picture of like the warm up you guys did before the championship match. What about from like the mental side? How do you approach it? Do you treat it like just another match? Do you kind of, I guess, how do you, like when you're in the locker room talking to the players and they're nervous, like how do you approach it?
Yeah, again, pretty vanilla, but one of the things that we've done here was when we structured what our match days look like, we basically asked the question in the room of like, okay, what do we want that to look like on championship day? And then that we worked our way back from there, right? Like, here's what we want. We want to be eating around this time. We want to have some kind of serve and pass around this time. If we can manage that, sometimes you can't manage that piece. You know, film session, how many film sessions do we want to have? What does the scout process look like for that match? And then whatever that match was, whatever we came up with of this is how we're going to feel good about going in and playing in an NCAA final. This is what it's going to look like the first match of the fall. And that we try to keep that structure the same as much as possible. So if there's no variation, I always felt as an athlete, I was pretty lucky in my career. I got to play in some pretty high stressful competitions. You know, I played in 2 Olympics and 3 NCAA matches and a bunch of stuff overseas and won some beach tournaments. And I got to be a part of a bunch of things like that. That was always the comforting piece to me of like, you know, at the end of the day, look, we're doing what we do that I've done 100 other times. Like, we're just preparing to play this match. Obviously some players deal with that stuff better than others. And we throw it out there, you know, I'll throw it out there when we're in situations that are tough during the season of like, hey, this is, you know, instead of like, you know, oh my God, we're losing to this team, we shouldn't be losing, of like, this is awesome for us. We need this kind of pressure. We need to be put in these situations where you're questioning things or things aren't running smoothly for us, because this is what it's going to feel like when you walk out in front of a sold out stadium for the NCAA finals. You know, there's going to be some nerves, and those nerves are good. And I don't know, we kind of embrace that piece.
That's makes sense, and it seemed like it worked. It worked pretty well. I'm curious, as you guys move forward into next season, you know, it seems like Ubuntu was a great theme and made sense for the group you guys had, the really deep group. And I don't imagine you're going to have a group moving forward where you're really thin. But I don't know, if you find something that works, do you stay with it? Like, okay, let's keep this theme, or does it need to be fresh? Like, do you have to have a new kind of theme each year? How do you guys go about that?
Yeah, I think you need to come up with something new. Again, so when we won it in 2012, we lost one player from 12 to 13. We had a couple of new players come in, but it wasn't this big. Like, we kind of had our same team. She was a 6 rotation starter for us and pretty unique. So we knew there were going to be some challenges in kind of restructuring the system and kind of how we played. But we didn't lose all these pieces or have all this new stuff coming in. And that team was 100% different than the team before. It doesn't take much, I think. So I think the way that we think about it is that we try to come up with something new. It may be structured around the same kind of ideals and beliefs. Again, we try to get our players' input more than us saying, hey, here's what our theme's going to be. Like, everybody, let's go. I just think anytime you can have I don't know, however you structure it, the players' input or your ability to convince the players that they came up with it, whether they did or not, is a pretty powerful thing.
Right.
So the cool thing for us is we've kind of had this little mini season in the spring. Not all of our players are here, but a lot of our players. We had 4 players come in at semester. We had 3 freshmen in a transfer. And then we've got 3 more kids coming in the fall. But so we had the majority of our group, but we got to go kind of on this little mini adventure with the beach thing. So we're going to take some things from that, some stuff that we were able to do. Some of the lessons I think we learned and some of that'll become our theme for the coming year.
Nice. So it's already been worked on. You probably have a sense of what's ahead.
Yeah, 100%. And historically, we've tried to wait until the whole group is there, and it's just such a quick turnaround.
Yeah,
and especially with the freshmen, they come in and they're like, their heads are spinning and they're trying to just wrap their mind around whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
Usually, to have that stuff a little more established and something that they can just jump into and, okay, this is what we're doing. And it's, I don't know, when we would try to wait for the whole group to get there, it would take us too long to get through that process, I think.
Yeah. And what about giving them autonomy, giving them a say in what you're going to be about, what your themes are going to be? How do you guys do that? How do you include them?
Yeah, a lot of not a lot of meetings, but meetings. Usually we'll prep, if we've got some leaders, some senior players on the team, we'll sit down and talk with them a little bit more, kind of either help them with some ideas or ask them to come up with some things. And we'll sit down as a group and kind of just group think the whole thing, with a whiteboard and writing stuff up on the board and what resonates, what doesn't. We do come up with a theme, having them generate stuff around that theme, whether it's artwork or, hey, we're going to go print up some t-shirts. What do you guys want that to say? Stuff that they can, that when they're putting that shirt on, they go, oh, Asia made this, or I made this. Like, it's not something that the coaches just passed out. It's something that's part of their group versus us just giving it to them.
Yeah. That's great. That's a good idea. Okay. So moving on to the staff, I wanted to get into your guys' championship staff, and I believe the whole staff's coming back. But anyways, thinking about the past, I think having a high functioning staff is a huge part of it. And obviously balancing, I mean, it's a good problem to have too many talented people, but it's a problem and it's a challenge. So I'm sure having your staff made it, what you guys did made it, you guys were able to bring the best out of what you had. So I'm just wondering, first, what do you think made the 3 of you, I know with your volunteer too, what made the coaching staff effective?
Yeah, again, I think Jarrett's done a really good job in this of just balancing kind of workflow, and I don't know, roles change from year to year. I think roles change from staff to staff. We've had more, well, I don't know. I've been here and I've worked with three other assistants now with David. But I think Jarrett does a really good job of just kind of integrating. He doesn't micromanage at all. I've been around other coaches that are just kind of like, texting you at 2 a.m, and that's definitely not Jarrett's MO. So I think, defining those roles, being comfortable with them, finding the strengths and weaknesses with every individual and figuring out how those roles would change when there's turnover is hugely important. I think one of the harder things in coaching, most people want to, I don't know, I think they call it like a type A personality, but I think the majority of human beings want to feel like they're in control of stuff. And being a coach, I think, is a profession where you don't get to feel that all the time. You obviously get to control what you can control, and you can build structure around things, but at the end of the day, you're rolling a team of 19 and 20-year-olds out and asking them to go do something that's pretty hard to do. So being okay with that and not bringing stress to the what is already a stressful situation, I think is huge. And I think Jarrett, I think the cool thing is the staffs that we've had here have all gone through it a little bit. We all haven't had the same experiences, but we've all been involved and went through college and understand all those things. So I don't know. I think one of the funny things that comes up in our meetings, a kid goes out and does something dumb on a Friday night, and we're all disappointed that we got to deal with it and whatever. And then we all kind of look at each other and we're like, what were we doing on a Friday night when we were in college?
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah. All right. Here, little back to reality. She's a young kid. They're all going to make mistakes at times. Let's learn our lesson, move on. It's not the end of the world for her or for us. It's obviously not what you want to be doing, but it's just part of the deal and part of life. So I think that perspective, goes a long way. I think keeping egos in check is huge. You see some of these coaching staffs now that just think they're the end all be all. And I think that percolates down to the team. We tell our kids all the time, like, hey, we're going to make some mistakes. We don't know everything either. We're going to get the information and we're going to behave in some manner that we think is best for the group before the individuals. There was something on Netflix. I think they interviewed 6 coaches across the spectrum of sports. I forget what it was called, but they interviewed Doc Rivers, and he says he sits his team down every year. And I thought it was a really, really good way of putting it. Was basically like, look, I'm going to make decisions that are always best for the group. So they may not be good for you. They may not be good for me. They may not be good for my family, but I'm always going to do what I think is best for our team and our group. We can talk our way around, and you may agree with it and you may not, but that's where I'm coming from. And sometimes it's going to be great for you, and sometimes it's not going to be great for you, and sometimes it's going to be great for me, and sometimes it's not going to be great for me. But this is the motivation. And I think we behave from a position that we try to, I think we do a good job of letting our girls know, like, hey, we're not going to treat all of you guys exactly the same, just like I don't treat my son or my daughter the same. They're both my kids and I both love them the same, but one's a 21-year-old young woman and the other's a 16-year-old adolescent boy. I don't treat them the same every day when I go home. So I'm not going to treat, a fifth-year senior the way I'm going to treat a first-year freshman. We're going to treat you the same from a position of love and respect, but I don't know. It's not always going to be equal. And I don't know. I just think we do a good job of talking about those things and letting them know that we really care about them and we love them. And obviously there's going to be times where there's tough decisions that they may not agree with.
And then I guess for your staff specifically, I think most schools think you need to have a female staff member to coach, women's volleyball. And you guys didn't have a paid staff member, I think. So I guess, do you have to approach things differently if that's the case, or how do you handle that?
I think you need to be cognizant of it. I don't know that we approach anything all that differently. I guess it was by design in some case. We had a volunteer who was a female, so I think she was actually a great outlet for the girls if they felt they needed that. Our medical staff is female as well, so there's connection there. I think there's obviously some things that they're more comfortable going to a female staff member with. So I don't know. It's an interesting thought, and I don't disagree with it. I think it's probably better to have at least one female on staff, if not more. But I also don't think it's an absolute.
Right. Most important to have good coaches and good people, it seems like.
Yeah, for sure. And I would probably reverse those. I think good people before good coaches. Right? If you have great people around your program, I don't think you're going to do anybody any harm with some maybe not most fundamental coaching.
Hmm.
For sure, if you're not a great human being, you can do some harm there.
Yeah. Yeah. So thinking of your staff, you guys had David Hunt, who came from Pepperdine, which has obviously been a really good program on the men's side. And you, I think, could take any head coach job in the country if you wanted to. But, you know, so you have the two of you as assistant coaches, which seems like it'd be easy to, you talked about control, to get dissatisfied with not having as much control as you want, having ego get in the way. So I'm just curious how you guys balanced with the two of you and having Jared as your leader, how you balance that.
Yeah, again, kudos to Jarrett. I think Jarrett just does a really good job of the way he manages our group. And, you know, a lot of it's basically, you know, here's your duties or assignments or what the things on your table that you need to get done. And he just lets you go and do them. We definitely don't agree on everything all the time. We have some pretty heated discussions. I think we're all in the mindset of that we have a voice and our voice is valued. But at the end of the day, it's Jarrett's decision. So we're always leaving the room with consensus on whatever we're doing, whether we agree with it or not. I think is probably the bigger thing. Like I said, we're definitely not in agreement all the time, whether it's a volleyball issue or just other issues on how we're running the program. But I think Jarrett does a good job of always soliciting and wanting feedback and info. I don't think there's ever been a time where we walk in and Jarrett just says, hey, here's what we're doing, and this is how we're doing it.
Hmm.
He's more of the, hey, what do you guys think? You know, give me your input here and let's have a discussion. Which makes a fun place to work.
Yeah.
I mean, that again, we get into some pretty interesting discussions on all kinds of things. And volleyball being one of them. I think it's one of the cooler things about being in a program like this for volleyball is I think we have all these different experiences. You know, Jarrett's been around the women's game a hell of a lot longer than I have, or obviously David has. And both David and I have a little more men's background. And I think just bringing all those things, whether they're systematic or how we train or how we perform mechanically and some skill sets, I think is super interesting and different. We definitely do some stuff systematically that most D1 women's programs aren't doing, that we've taken from other aspects of the game.
Yeah, he clearly has a lot of respect for you. So with your path, how have you thought about, because I know there's this maybe traditional thought, you know, you're a volunteer, then you're an assistant, maybe then you're a head coach at a mid-major, and then you're supposed to go, you know, and you've stayed a different path. And it just doesn't, yeah, I guess one side of me is like, well, you're supposed to always be moving up. That's the American way. But and then obviously you're in a great position, but how have you approached that sort of thought process behind coaching?
Yeah. You're the first one to ask me that. It's interesting.
Really? No one's asked you that?
You just planted the seed, John.
No, you're asked that every day, huh?
I get asked that a lot. I've been super fortunate. Like I said, I've had this playing career where I got to do all these cool and interesting things, and be a part of some really successful things and some not so successful things. And I didn't ever really think I would get into being a lifetime volleyball person. I had aspirations to get in the medical field out of college, and my career just kind of was like one thing after another. Like, oh, you know, I'll go play overseas for a year or two. That sounds pretty cool. And then, you know, I'll go try out for the national team. I'll probably get cut in a month, but at least I'll go do that. And all of a sudden, I'm 32 with a family. And I got into coaching kind of thinking the same thing. Like, look, this isn't I love what I do. I love that I've been able to do the things I do where I've done them. But it's also a job. It's not, it's hard to say it's not who I am, but I hope it's not necessarily who I am. So for me, when I got into coaching, I didn't want to be the, hey, I'm here for 3 years. Hey, I'm here for 3 years. Hey, I'm here for 3 years. for sure, my playing career got me a little bit beyond the jumping point for most coaches, right? I got hired into a second assistant job at a D1 program, which is probably pretty rare, just coming out of playing. But when I decided to take this job, I had some opportunities at some other places, and this just seemed like the place that I would be and my family would be happy. My kids were kind of getting into the middle school age, so it was kind of like let's go somewhere where we could be for a little bit so that they can anchor down. So yeah, to be honest with you, I'm happy here. UT is a great place to work. Jarrett's a great guy to work for. We've been very fortunate that we've been real competitive while I've been here. And they take care of me. So, people knock, and for a little while, I would talk to some people, and then I just decide, like, look, if I'm not super interested or like 100% in, like, the idea, if they've offered me this job, I would take it. Most of the time it'd kind of be like, yeah, I'm interested in talking to you, but there's probably no chance I'm taking that job. I just really haven't entertained anything. So, I don't know. I'm getting to some point in my career where maybe that becomes a possibility, but I don't need to have head coach next to my name to feel fulfilled. I still sleep well at night. And Jarrett, look, the other cool thing is Jarrett lets me do all these things that probably most head coaches wouldn't let their assistants do. He lets me kind of function autonomously in some positions, stuff that I would like to be doing. I've been able to go to the last 2 Olympics with the men's team, with some intrusion in our seasons a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And Jarrett's been great with that. So I still get to go do some stuff. I'm going to go to Canada here this next week with the guys for VNL for a few days.
That's great.
Yeah, it doesn't probably sound like a vacation to most, but it still gives me that little bit of a fix to be with the guys. And for sure, I bring some stuff back. Like I said, we integrate some systems that the international men stuff where the guys are using that.
No, that's great. And I ask because I think it's cool when I see someone, doing what makes them happy versus what you're, supposed to do, or this, trajectory that is, I don't know, just expected. I think it's cool that you're prioritizing what's best for you and your family versus like, this is what you do in sport.
And look, you talk to most coaches. Look, there's certain places in the country that I don't necessarily want to go live, but I could be, if I was by myself, I can go be a volleyball coach anywhere, right? Like, I'll figure it out. Maybe that's not ideal for me, but I'll figure it out. And I don't know, in the back of my mind, when I'm grinding and working 60 or 70 hours a week and engaged with whatever we're doing, what's my family up to is for sure a bigger part of it. I don't know. I don't think I would feel great if they were just following me around the country to do that. So
right. Okay, well, last question. Got to you and Jarrett were out there at Gulf Shores and got to play some fours. You and I were on the same team, and I guess I'm wondering if you've recovered from my bad setting or how your body's holding up since that game.
I was nothing to do with your play at all. You were cleaning up all of my contacts, but I was pretty stoked to just get through that and be upright at the end of it.
Me too.
It was a good little crew out there.
That was fun. Yeah. Cool. No, that was fun. And I think you had mentioned too, when we were doing it, it's like, you would never see this on the indoor side. And, my concern is we'll lose that at some point on the beach side as it grows. And, but I think it's really cool that does happen. You have, Holly McPeak out there with some former Florida State players, and Hector from TCU, and you and me. Just a cool thing and Angie, that's just a part of the culture we have in the sport right now. I hope we maintain it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Eventually it'll go the other way, and it'll be a bummer, because indoor volleyball has done a little bit of that as well. I think over the last 10 or 15 years, it's
Well, this was awesome. I appreciate you spending the time, and it was really fun to learn from you and learn about the program, and even dive in a little bit to the past at UCLA and how it's applied to what you've done now. And just thanks a lot for doing this. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it. It's awesome.
Cool. All right.
Thanks, Erik.
You're welcome.